Why did Moses launch an attack on the kingdom of Bashan before crossing the Jordan River? And what secrets are buried at the Wheel of Giants on the Golan Heights? Have you ever wondered if the place where Jesus was baptized isn't at all where we've been told it is? And could hallucinations, rogue AIs, and technology be the key to unlocking the literal gates of hell? You know, these questions have either been overlooked or left unanswered by Bible scholars for centuries, and the truth behind them may shock you. Get ready. Today's guest is about to blow your mind. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to SkyWatchTV. I'm Joe Artis-Horn. Today, we continue a discussion that we started last week that I guarantee is going to blow your mind. But before we dive right in, let me introduce who's here. His broadcasting career has spanned for more than 40 years. He's the best-selling author of the groundbreaking books Last Clash of the Titans, The Great Inception, and The Second Coming of Saturn, Derek Gilbert. And she's a legend and pioneer of podcast radio, Christian television personality, and best-selling author of the Red Wing Saga, Sharon Gilbert.
Thank you.
If you missed last week, go back wherever you watch SkyWatchTV, whether that's our mobile app where they can't cancel us.
Right.
You can download it at the App Store.
Right.
Or social media. Go back to wherever it is that you watch SkyWatchTV. We began a discussion that covers the new book from Defender Publishing by Derek and Sharon Gilbert called The Gates of Hell, Unlocking the Ganymede Code and the Demonic Portals of Mount Hermon and the United States Capitol. And wow, the idea that Cain and Abel, a ritual sacrifice done via portal. Have you ever heard that adaptation of that old biblical account? The way that the Gilberts frame these biblical events with layers that, you know, even as much as I've been around this for decades, still continue to surprise me. Are you with me?
Yes.
We're learning something every time we have this discussion. I want to dive right back into the conversation, Derek. We talked about portals, the very real, palpable tangibility of these being aspects of the spirit realm that people ought not to mess with, and yet they do it on the daily. There's video now surfacing all over the world with the invention of the cell phone, parts of the sky tearing open, things coming through. It is speculative whether that is supernatural activity, whether those are actually entities entering our plane of existence for whatever purpose only God knows.
Right.
And yet you see, at the same time, despite our politics, there is a darkness emerging on the world stage, regardless of whether we think we're in a season of reprieve politically because, let's say, conservatives have won the most recent round of elections, et cetera. There's a darkness that marches on and rages regardless.
Absolutely.
I want to dive into your book, The Gates of Hell, which I think is more relevant now than ever. Why did Moses and the Israelites attack the kingdom of Bashan before crossing the Jordan River?
Well, Og, the king of Bashan, was described as the last of the remnant of the Rephaim. And it's clear when you read the account of the conquest of Canaan in Joshua chapter 11 that it was the Rephaim and the Anakim who were counted as Rephaim that were the objective, because that summary of Joshua's war describes how he eliminated the Anakim from the hill country of Israel and the hill country of Judah. Only in Gaza, in Gath, and in Ashdod did some remain. Why is that relevant? Because 400 years later, David and his men had to do battle against the remnant of the Philistine giants. Now, we wrote about this in our book Veneration, that whether there was a second incursion or not, we know from Canaanite texts. For example, we mentioned in the previous program, the Rephaim texts found at Ugarit, that the Canaanites, the Amorites who lived around ancient Israel, were venerating these spirits. The Philistines were as well. And there's some textual suggestions that we go into in previous books and also here, that Goliath and his brothers were described as descendants of the Rapha, descendants of the giant, may not have been literal genetic descendants, because the word in Hebrew, Yelid ha-Rapha. Yelid does not mean a genetic descendant. It means one who is a member of a group into which one has been consecrated or initiated. So it's like a warrior cult that venerated the spirits of the Rephaim.
Like the berserkers.
Like the Viking berserkers, who, according to the texts from 1,000 years ago, the berserkers of the Vikings were impervious to pain, heat, cold, but they were so insanely violent on the battlefield that the Viking kings had to say to one another, let's stop using these guys. They're killing our own guys.
Wow.
So that's the closest equivalent we can come to. I mean, even though Goliath was clearly larger than average, larger than normal, perhaps. When Saul was counseling David not to go out there, he didn't say, he's huge. He said, no, he's been a warrior from his youth.
Right.
And you are but a youth. It's like he's a trained killer. This is why I think God directed Moses, Joshua, and the Israelites to go first after the last of the remnant of the Rephaim, and then go after the Anakim, who were counted as Rephaim, because they were venerating those demonic spirits that, as we described last week, are actually the spirits of the giants who were destroyed in the flood of Noah.
Where do we find references in the Bible, though, to the practice of contacting spirits?
King Saul, the night before he died, consulted a medium. That's how it's translated in English. The Hebrew word ov actually comes from a word in the ancient Hurrian language. They're the Horites of the Bible. The word is ov, and that means a ritual pit. They would literally dig a hole into the earth, go down there, scribe a magic circle, sacrifice a small animal, and then summon spirits from the netherworld. And you remember that account, Samuel emerges from the earth. Well, because the medium, the ov, had a ritual pit. One of the giants that David and his men had to dispatch was named, in English, we would probably read it as Ishbi Benab. Okay, it's a weird sounding name.
Yeah.
But if you separate the second part of it, in Hebrew it would actually be Ishvi Ben Ov. Ishvi, son of the medium or son of the owner of the ritual pit. And, credit to our friend Brian Godawa, who pointed this out in his novel about David. He made that giant who almost killed David, Ishvi, the son of the woman visited by King Saul the night before Saul and Jonathan were killed by the Philistines. Now, there's nothing in the Bible that says that that's true, but it's a great plot device. But it does suggest that the Philistine giants, again, the son of the owner of a ritual pit, that they were part of this occult practice of trying to contact the spirits. But again, this is why, as we discussed last week, God told Moses, tell the Israelites, do not consult with necromancers, do not consult with mediums.
Right.
It's not because it's a waste of time and it doesn't really work. It's because there are spirits that will answer and they're not faithful or loyal. And what's really interesting is that a scholar named George Hyder, who wrote a book about the cult of Molech, pointed out that the prohibitions about sacrificing children to Molech, 2 different locations in Leviticus, is connected to the practice of consulting mediums and necromancers. In other words, so there was some connection between the sacrifice of children and trying to get information from the spirit realm. Those 2 practices are connected in the mind of God.
There is a hideous stone in southern Spain. It's called the Pozamoro
Yes.
relief, and it shows demonic entities enjoying meals. And if you look carefully at these, they almost look like pigs, these demonic entities that are carved on the stone. And they've got dishes in front of them, and their tongues are coming out, and they're enjoying these meals. And some of the bowls have little feet coming out of them. Yeah, the sacrifice of children in order to commune with what was believed to be the dead ancestors. But of course, they were communing with demons. They were communing with the spirits of the giants.
Yeah. And of course, we know that those same spirits are active today behind much of what we're seeing manifest in the fact that we've got so many missing children. This is something I talk about all the time. But it's the same. We talked about it in the Rescue Us series. These same demonic entities that delight in the dismantling of God's most precious gift to us, our children. So nothing has changed.
No.
It's the same old evil, modern day.
Right. And, again, Moses got these prohibitions from God. In the 15th century BC, this mausoleum of Pozo Moro, which was found at a Phoenician site in southern Spain. It's on display in the museum in Madrid now. Dates to about the time of Nebuchadnezzar in the 6th century BC. So this is a very ancient practice, and it continued into the Christian era, where Roman and Greek historians were writing in horror about what the Carthaginians, who were Phoenicians, who were just Amorites, were doing with their children. So this continued for a long, long time, and the Israelites got drawn into it.
And it's more than just sacrificing children. In order to commune with these entities, you had to offer blood of whatever kind. They would score their chests and their arms, like furrows in the ground, in order to offer up their own blood, in order to offer up any blood, not just their children, but themselves as well. So this idea of gaining power from offering blood is a really old one, as it goes back to Cain and Abel.
You know, and the idea that you would have to carve something out of your body in exchange for some loan of power from some entity, where Jesus Christ offered his blood to completely redeem you from your own sin.
Exactly.
right.
Exactly.
Derek and Sharon, one of the things that you both covered in this book so interestingly, and I think that this is something that's going to resonate with people, you spent a day last spring investigating a megalithic site on the Golan Heights called Gilgal Raphaim, or the Wheel of the Giants. What did you guys learn?
One of the things that I really found interesting is when I was researching for the Red Wing Saga, I discovered that one of the main characters, the historical people who was involved in the Jack the Ripper murders, which is where I start the first book, was an investigator for the Palestine Exploration Fund, and he discovered on the top of Mount Hermon this wall that goes counterclockwise that requires that you circumambulate like a spiral. Well, we see the same sort of formation in Gilgal Raphaim, going counterclockwise into something in the middle. On Mount Hermon, it was a big depression where you did a ritual libation ceremony. In this one, it goes into a covered area that takes you into sort of like the Ove, going down into the earth. It takes you into a false underworld. It's a dark area, a chamber, where once a year, the sun hits the threshing stone. So it's this same idea of a liminal space from out to in. And when we were in Sardinia, we saw a lot of tombs of the giants. And even today, 12-year-olds are sent into these tombs to spend the night so that they can actually invite in the power of the ancestors or the power of the giants. So I believe that that's what was taking place in the middle of Gilgal Raphaim. Either a priest went in there, or maybe they sent in their 12-year-olds, their young men.
Yeah, and that was the conclusion of Dr. Mike Freakman, whose research has just been phenomenal on this. He's also investigated another site that is overlooking the Jordan River. His belief was that that false underworld, false netherworld, was where a shaman or a priest would go in there to communicate with the ancestors. And he connected it to the structures that he excavated on the back of that serpent mound of Bashan, which is visible from Google Earth. I mean, this structure is so big you can see it from space, like Gilgal Raphaim. There were dwellings up there that date back to the Copper Age, the pre-Bronze Age period. And he believed that this is where the priests that oversaw the rituals in Gilgal Raphaim would live. The structure of Gilgal Raphaim was, again, connected to this practice of worshiping the spirits of what people thought were their ancestors, but were in fact the demonic spirits that, again, derived from the giants who were destroyed in the flood of Noah.
Derek, for people watching this program in 2025, there's probably people fascinated by the ancient aspects of this as well as the biblical accounts. But we're also, again, and I mentioned this last week, hoping and praying, and it's working, by the way, people that would be self-proclaimed agnostics or disbelievers in the spirit realm, they find SkyWatch TV looking for answers to New Age, or what happens when we die from this plane of existence? Is there an afterlife? Or how do I communicate with ghosts? And SkyWatch TV will pop up. SkyWatch TV is converting those out there that aren't even intentionally looking for the hope of the gospel.
We're answering those questions that pastors don't feel comfortable answering.
Exactly. But if somebody watching this program is still unsure, maybe a Christian out there, okay, guys, but let's be adults. Why does this matter to me today?
We see a lot of references to this desire to commune with an unseen realm in buildings, in architecture. In Rome, there is the Pantheon that has an oculus in the dome. And that oculus was originally open to the sky. And it was this idea of going from your human state when you pass away and then rising up into the heavens, sometimes to commune with the gods, to seat with the gods in their assembly, or even to become a constellation in the sky. There's a version of that in Washington.
Yeah, and this is what your father, Dr. Tom Horn, wrote about in Apollyon Rising 2012, Zenith 2016. The oculus is inside the U.S. Capitol. It's a false opening to the sky, but it's the same concept. It represents a portal. In the Pantheon in Rome, it represented the portal through which Caesar would ascend to become one of the gods. Inside the United States Capitol, it represents George Washington. We suggest that the way Washington is depicted there, where his legs are wrapped in purple.
Yeah, there's a
being
painting underneath the dome, so
right,
you see
the
this.
apotheosis of Washington, or George Washington becoming a
And
god.
it means, exactly.
Yeah, purple cloth around his legs, purple being the color of royalty in ancient Rome. But it also was similar to the way the statue of Saturn, or Shemyaza, Abaddon, Apollyon, had his legs wrapped in the temple of Saturn in Rome, except during the Saturnalia, which was the most popular religious festival in the annual Roman calendar. We suggest in the book that this is what George Washington represents inside the dome, the return of old Saturn, the return of Shemyaza, the leader of the sons of God in Genesis 6, who thinks that he should be the one ruling over all creation to his rightful place in the cosmos. But the Ganymede Code, which we reference in the subtitle to the book, Sharon pointed this out and found this. She wrote this in Zeitgeist 2025.
Yes.
And then I expanded on it a bit in The Second Coming of Saturn, and we bring it into the book here as well. Ganymede, a rather minor figure in Greek mythology, the Greek religion, was a young man believed to be the son of the king of Troy. He wore a Phrygian cap, which is that red, floppy, pointed hat that you see in a lot of 19th century artwork. Ganymede was seen by Zeus, Jupiter, Baal to the Canaanites, and was so comely in the ancient.
He was a beautiful boy.
He was a beautiful youth. And so he was, the way it was taught to us in high school mythology, he was carried off to Mount Olympus to become the cupbearer to the gods. But when you see the way it's depicted in, say, mosaics from ancient Rome, that eagle that Zeus turned himself into was not just carrying the boy. The title of those depictions is usually the rape of Ganymede.
Yeah. Oh.
So, in other words, Ganymede is depicted on the section of the painting, the apotheosis of Washington, called agriculture. And in that depiction, he represents young America.
Oh, okay.
So young America depicted in the inside of the U.S. Capitol dome. The Capitol is named the Capitol at the insistence of Thomas Jefferson, because that's the name of the temple of Jupiter, Zeus, Baal, in Rome, the Capitolium.
Yeah, the OL Indian.
Yes, the Capitolium. The significance there is that in Matthew 12, beginning at verse 22, also in Revelation 2, verse 13, Jesus identified this entity, Baal, Zeus, as Satan. So the United States Capitol, the building where our legislature meets, is named for the temple of Satan in Rome, and on the inside of that dome, the oculus representing old Saturn, Shemyaza, Abaddon, Apollyon, rising to become the ruler. Young America is depicted as the submissive junior partner of Zeus, Jupiter, Satan.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, you can support the ministry of SkyWatch TV and our continued efforts to share the gospel of Jesus Christ throughout the four corners of the world and receive your very own copy of this incredible masterpiece when you order the Gates of Hell Ultimate Collection. Not only does this incredible special offer include Derek and Sharon Gilbert's new book, The Gates of Hell, Unlocking the Ganymede Code and the Demonic Portals of Mount Hermon and the United States Capitol, but it also includes the best-selling books Veneration, Unveiling the Ancient Realms of Demonic Kings and Satan's Battle Plan for Armageddon, and The Second Coming of Saturn, The Great Conjunction, America's Temple, and the Return of the Watchers by Derek and Sharon Gilbert. Veneration uncovers how the ancient giants known as the Rephaim influenced biblical beliefs, leading to the corruption of God's people and their eventual return to fight at Armageddon alongside the Antichrist. The Second Coming of Saturn reveals a dark prophecy with the 2020 conjunction marking the return of the ancient god whose reign will bring a hellish golden age as foretold in occult symbols and Bible prophecy. Sold separately, these items hold a retail value of over $60. Yours now for your donation of only $40, which includes free shipping to all U.S. orders. So don't delay. You can support the ministry of SkyWatch TV and help us continue spreading the gospel of Jesus Christ right now by scanning the QR code on your screen using the camera app on your phone for instant access to this special opportunity. Visit us at skywatchtvstore.com or call 1-844-750-4985 and ask for the Gates of Hell Ultimate Collection now. Ladies and gentlemen, make sure you do not miss out on this special opportunity. Derek and Sharon, with just a few minutes left on the clock, I want to dive right back into our conversation. Here in the book, you claim that the place where Jesus was baptized is not where most people think it is. Now, why is this so important?
Well, it's because it shows Jesus' declaration of war on these fallen entities that we've been talking about for the last 2 weeks. Matthew, Mark, and Luke, they just make reference to John the Baptist baptizing in the wilderness or the wilderness of Judea. And that's why most people think this was down near the traditional site across from Jericho. The United Nations says it's the place, so it must be true, right? Kingdom of Jordan spending $300 million to develop it into a tourist place. God bless them. But in John chapter 1, we get the most specific geographic clues. John was confronted by the Levites and the priests from Jerusalem. What? You're baptizing? Who gives you this authority?
Okay.
And John, the apostle, writes, these things took place in Bethany across the Jordan where John was baptizing. This is all connected to the baptism of Jesus and the calling of the first disciples. People have been looking for Bethany across the Jordan, meaning east of the Jordan River, for 2,000 years. It doesn't exist. In 1872, a friend of Sir Charles Warren by the name of Lieutenant Claude Conder, who was also working for the Palestine Exploration Fund, said, the oldest Greek manuscripts of the Gospel of John read Bethania, which we've anglicized into Bethany. But Bethania, he said, was a Greek form of the Latin name Botania, which is Bashan. Bashan across the Jordan. And when you continue on in John chapter 1, beginning at verse 29, where you see the next day, John sees Jesus coming toward him. Behold, the Lamb of God who takes away the sins of the world. And then the next day again, he calls the first disciples. He calls first Andrew, who goes home to get Peter. Well, they lived at Bethsaida, which is about 1.5 miles north of the Sea of Galilee. And then Philip the next day, who was also from Bethsaida. The first 3 disciples get called from a town north of the Sea of Galilee. East of the Jordan River is Bashan, north of the Sea of Galilee. We also know that Peter and Andrew were partners with James and John in a fishing business on the Sea of Galilee. What are the odds that Andrew, the first disciple called, was following John the Baptist 90 miles away near Jericho?
Yeah,
Right.
no.
It was not. It was north of the Sea of Galilee. And in fact, we think the site that we hinted at in the first part of the program, called Kharbet Beteha, which is an Arabic name that means ruins of Bethsaida. It's 1/2 mile from the ancient site of Bethsaida. It's a smaller version of Gilgal Rephaim on the bank of the Jordan River, about 1 mile north of the Sea of Galilee.
At the time, the Sea of Galilee would have come up very close to Bethsaida, so being a fisherman made sense. But having this structure on a hill overlooking this beautiful part of the Jordan River, seeing the Lord down there, being, just the Holy Spirit coming down as a dove, hearing the voice of the Lord at a pagan ritual site.
Devoted to the cult of the dead.
Yes. And what a poke in the eye, another
Right.
signal to the fallen realm. I am here.
Right.
Yeah.
Praise Jesus.
This site is a perfect place because the bank slopes down about 75 or 80 feet from the location of the megalithic structure to the Jordan. It's a perfect location. It makes a natural theater for somebody down at the river baptizing and preaching for people sitting on the hillside. In fact, our friend Doug Van Dorn has suggested that might even be the wilderness of Bethsaida, where Jesus fed the 5,000.
Oh, wow.
And there's some petroglyphs at this site, Kharbet Beteha, that suggest that might be the case.
This type of information that resides in the book, The Gates of Hell, I think is going to be the first time a lot of people hear this type of information. With just a couple of minutes left, Sharon, the Red Wing Saga, you're one of the best, and I'm serious. I'm jealous that you won't let me publish those books. But you're one of the best fact-based fictional writers probably alive today, and I'm not just saying that because I love Sharon. I'm just straight up. You look at the feedback from the people reading that saga. You did something very interesting with the front end of this book. You started with a fictional account of a rogue artificial intelligence called Kronos.
Kronos, exactly. This artificial intelligence appears to be a trainer. It's training other artificial intelligences to grow up, other algorithms. And that goes on today.
Right.
In fact, it's going on all over the world. China just announced that they've got an artificial intelligence that is close to being sentient. That's a whole lot better than anything we've got over here. It's to scare the West. That's why they made that announcement. But in the opening, Kronos is, but it's hiding his abilities. And by I use his intentionally. I won't spoil the ending, but it is not what the designers hoped for. Let's just put it that way. Because when you open up an electric system to the world to design and to feed into, because we're feeding it. We are constantly feeding these AIs through everything we do online. And they are learning, and they are gobbling it up like digital blood. They're gobbling it up. And eventually, the fallen realm will inhabit it. And it's very possible that this will become the image of the beast.
And it provides a completely plausible architecture for how technology could be used to open the literal gates of hell.
Yes, exactly, exactly. When I say digital blood, I don't want you to get scared because, oh gosh, I'm posting to Facebook or whatever. No, I think that there are things being done on the dark web that are so dark, you and I would be terrified, horrified if we heard about them. Because that is going on all over the world.
Yes.
Those same sacrifices.
Yeah. But that gets back to our point that this is not just something that was going on in the ancient world with these megalithic structures. Today, we've just given it a scientific veneer, whether it's artificial intelligence, communicating with ET, or using hallucinogenic drugs to try to open our consciousness to another realm.
Right.
We're doing the same thing today, opening the portals, the gates of hell that are inside all of us when we exercise our free will.
That's right.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's all in the book, The Gates of Hell. Make sure that you get your copy. How much did you guys love having the Gilberts here? Unfortunately, we're all out of time, ladies and gentlemen. For everybody here in studio, everybody on panel, Derek and Sharon, thank you so much for coming back again this week. I'm Joe Artis Horn. Keep your eyes on the prize, which is Jesus Christ. We'll be back. Well, ladies and gentlemen, you can support the ministry of SkyWatch TV and our continued efforts to share the gospel of Jesus Christ throughout the four corners of the world and receive your very own copy of this incredible masterpiece when you order the Gates of Hell Ultimate Collection. Not only does this incredible special offer include Derek and Sharon Gilbert's new book, The Gates of Hell, Unlocking the Ganymede Code and the Demonic Portals of Mount Hermon and the United States Capitol, but it also includes the best-selling books Veneration, Unveiling the Ancient Realms of Demonic Kings and Satan's Battle Plan for Armageddon, and The Second Coming of Saturn, The Great Conjunction, America's Temple, and the Return of the Watchers by Derek and Sharon Gilbert. Sold separately, these items hold a retail value of over $60. Yours now for your donation of only $40, which includes free shipping to all U.S. orders. So don't delay. You can support the ministry of SkyWatch TV and help us continue spreading the gospel of Jesus Christ right now by scanning the QR code on your screen using the camera app on your phone for instant access to this special opportunity. Visit us at skywatchtvstore.com or call 1-844-750-4985 and ask for the Gates of Hell Ultimate Collection now.